When you trip on shrooms, you're looking at your life from a zoomed out perspective. When you're in depression, you're kind of myopic. You can only see the past. You can only see your regrets. You can only see all the things you should have done, all the things you did wrong, all the things that you blame yourself for. And the shrooms very lovingly, very gently, sometimes not gently, they come in and they show you your life from a different perspective. It's such a powerful experience, just one trip, to have your perspective shifted, to have your consciousness shifted. You're still you, you're still James, you're still Osmod, but you're operating from an entirely different level of perception, and that changes you forever. And so in the midst of my depression, taking shrooms, realizing that I'm more than this situation, I'm more than this failure that I experienced, I'm more than this moment in life where I feel so stuck and so alone and so depressed. And then over multiple trips, it actually started rewiring my brain and started showing me that there was more to life.
Welcome to the Osmod James Xander show. We're having a cross collaboration. My guest today is the one and only James Xander. If you don't know James, you will by the end of this episode, but just to give you a preview of what's in store for our listeners today, James is a avid explorer. He's all things personal growth, all things exploration, freedom. He's really gotten into psychedelics over the past few years, where his goal is to get 1 billion people to try it, which is ambitious and yet world-changing at the same time. And in this conversation today, we're going to get James' perspective on, kind of how his journey, how he got started into it. Why is he so passionate about it? Why do this at all? Why not do this? Just get his personal perspective on why he thinks it's so important that he wants to get 1 billion people to try it. So I'm going to just pause and say, hey, James, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, no, same here. Looking forward to this. So, I gave you a brief introduction, but, I'm going to let you, it's always a question people ask, like, tell me about you. Like, I'm curious, like, if someone asked you, said, hey, James, tell me, what are you doing these days? Or what do you do? Like, how do you approach that question?
Yeah, so I run a podcast called The James Xander Trip, which is where I interview guests about psychedelics and spirituality. And the purpose of my podcast is to connect them deeper to their soul, to connect the listener deeper to their soul. And then on top of that, I run a YouTube channel all around psychedelics. And the goal is to educate people about how to intentionally do trips, how to safely do trips, and inspire those who are seeking more information around psychedelics on how they can do them. And then there's the mission, the 1 billion humans mission. And so my podcast and YouTube channel, they all tie into the mission. And the mission is, let's get 1 billion people on the planet to take shrooms on the same day and watch what happens to the planet's frequency. And also, let's get 1 billion people educated about shrooms. Let's get 1 billion people educated about the power of the plant medicines. Because I think if we have 1 in 8 people actively, intentionally using these plants, it would be a completely different world.
Yeah, that definitely sounds a brave new world. It'd be interesting to imagine if that was actually could happen. But yeah, this sounds really interesting. So I'd be curious, like, what do you feel are some of the positive impacts of doing shrooms? Like, why should anybody do it? Who should do it? And like, maybe who shouldn't do it? Like, how, if I'm talking to like the average Joe, but I'm just curious, like, how would you answer to somebody who's like, yeah, why should I do this? Why? What's on the other side of doing this? How would you begin to even answer that question? Because that's a loaded question, but like, how would you get someone even intrigued enough to like, hey, consider this?
Yes. I mean, first of all, I should say, I believe that people should only do them if they feel called to do them. So I think that's super important. So do not allow anyone to pressure you to do these plants. It's only if you feel an innate curiosity about them. But in general, the reason why one should do mushrooms or psychedelics in general is if they want an extra perspective into their life. So if you're someone who likes to do inner work and personal growth work, and you like to examine your mind, and you like to improve the way you do things, you like to improve your character, your life, psychedelics are like the supercharger for that, because they will show you the truth about you and the truth about your life that maybe you don't want to see, or maybe you haven't been paying attention to it, they will show you all the aspects of yourself that you can improve. And they will also give you the solutions and the ideas and the homework to execute on that vision. So first they'll show you all the BS, all the parts of you you don't want to see. Then they'll show you the vision, the who you could become, and then give you the homework of this is what you need to do to become the next greatest version of yourself. So I guess to answer your question, the reason why someone might want to do shrooms is if they want to step into the next greater version of themselves and they want to speed that process up. They want to reach the evolution of their next self. I think these are amazing tools for doing that inner work and for seeing the outer results of that.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Like, so it's a way to accelerate the journey as opposed to taking something, I don't know. Well, I guess I'd be curious, like, could you share any examples from your own personal life? Like what's been your experience? How many times have you done it? Like rough ballpark?
Yeah, I've lost count of how many shrooms.
Okay. Well, there you go. That's a hint in itself, I guess. Yeah.
I should have kept a tally because that would be interesting. I would say probably around 30 to 50 trips at this point.
Okay, so not in the hundreds, but definitely above like a handful of parties where randomly people do it.
Yeah, and I've done most of my trips. I would say 99% of them have been very intentional. They've been done with love and with a certain learning. Like I want to learn something out of it. I think the intention counts a lot. By the way, just to circle back to what you said earlier, why would someone want to do it? I think another reason, and this was true for me, was the curiosity. If you're someone who's curious about the true nature of reality, there's a little more to reality than meets the eye. And you want to see, like, what is this place? Is this a simulation? Is this a video game? Is this a dream of my consciousness? I think they're amazing tools for exploring reality. So maybe you think you've already reached the peak evolution. You don't need any more work, but you're just curious to know what's behind the veil. I think that would be an amazing, amazing tool. And the way that it's shown up for me in my life, your question was like, how has it evolved me?
Well, I'd be curious, like, if you had to, like, create like, yeah, I mean, take this question whichever direction you want to do, but I think it'd be interesting for the listeners to kind of like here are some key insights where you had it. I'd be curious to know like where you were kind of before and after, like here's where I was, here's why I was drawn to this, and here's kind of how it unfolded, and in whichever way it makes sense to you. So I'll leave that super broad, but I'd be curious to hear how your experience of using them and what impact have you seen in your life?
Yeah. Before shrooms, I was going through a depression, and I had lost a business that was very important to me, and I then proceeded to lose my entire net worth. So it was like, the shock of losing the business, the shock of losing my money. I felt like completely lost, and it sent me into a depression. And shrooms were one of the things, maybe one of the most important things that slowly but surely took me out of it. And the way they did it is that when you trip on shrooms, you're looking at your life from a zoomed out perspective. So when you're in depression, you're kind of myopic. You can only see the past. You can only see your regrets. You can only see all the things you should have done, all the things you did wrong, all the things that you blame yourself for. And the shrooms very lovingly, very gently, sometimes not gently, they come in and they show you your life from a different perspective. It's like almost like you get a zoomed out Google Maps view, and you're like, oh, I'm in this maze and I'm feel stuck, but now I can see the whole maze, and I can see the light at the end of the maze, and I can maybe find my way out of it. And it's such a powerful experience, just one trip, to have your perspective shifted, to have your consciousness shifted. You're still you, you're still James, you're still Osmond, but you're operating from an entirely different level of perception, and that changes you forever. And so in the midst of my depression, taking shrooms, realizing that I'm more than this situation, I'm more than this failure that I experienced. I'm more than this moment in life where I feel so stuck and so alone and so depressed. Um, and then over multiple trips, it actually started rewiring my brain and started showing me that there was more to life. And then the homework that I was talking about, it started showing me visions of what my life could be and inspiring me of what I could do. Like it inspired me to come to Bali, like I literally tripping on shrooms in Vancouver, Canada. And I distinctly heard the message, maybe not vocally, but I got the download of, you need to go to Bali. You need to go to Bali. And I'm like, and I kind of knew I was done with Canada for a bit. Like I had learned what I needed to learn in Vancouver, and I knew it was time to go. And it was just amazing for the shrooms to give me this exact location. You need to be in Bali. And I was like, okay, I'll go there. And Bali was completely closed to the world at the time. So I first went to Mexico, which was really fortunate because in Mexico, I did ayahuasca for the first time. And then I did ayahuasca. I had my journey with Mother Aya, and Bali opened up, and I was ready to go to Bali because I had gotten all the homework from Mother Aya. So, life works in such beautiful divine timing. Sometimes the things we think that are not working out, they're actually all part of the plan. And when you look back at your life, you're like, wow, if this thing didn't lead to this thing, and it's like everything just, you see the breadcrumbs of reality.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. Like, how drastically would you say you are from from that Diddy who was just like, and how long ago was this? Like, when did you get started?
So my first experience with psychedelics was 2019. So that would be 4 years.
So right before the pandemic. Okay.
Yeah. I had a good year of non-pandemic tripping. So, 2019, 4 years ago, how different am I? Well, for one thing, and I know you know this, I did not want to be on camera at all, ever.
Yeah.
and look what happened. What happened in 4 years? It was
I always see you now. Like, I see you all the time. Like, oh my God, on my YouTube feed, everywhere. Like,
so you look at that, and you knew me from before, you know me now, and you're like, how does that happen? Part of it is working on oneself, but then what does that mean? And I feel like a big part of it was the shrooms allowing me to be seen. The shrooms working on my self-love, working on my fears. That's the other thing shrooms are so good at, is they dissolve your fears around something. So probably 4 years ago, the reason I didn't want to be on camera was I was afraid of being seen. I was insecure about this or that. And then the shrooms, slowly but surely, they bring you back to love. They bring you back to a grounded centeredness. Like you find your center line. And from that center line, it's so easy to do things because now you're not afraid. So I would say maybe one of the biggest gifts of the shrooms is how they've dissolved my fears around life, around being seen, around death. Like the effects are extraordinary. And I feel that is true I talk to other people who do shrooms, and almost every single person tells me the same thing, like how much just one trip impacts them and dissolves fears, dissolves blocks, makes them step into their most authentic self. I think this is one of the key things for me as well, is I feel so much more me right now than I did back then, because we all put on these masks and these layers to protect ourselves. And what the shrooms so cleverly do, they don't tell you this when you start doing them, but they slowly take off all the masks. And before you know it, you're wearing very little masks, or hopefully no mask, and you're allowing the world to see you as you are. And that is priceless.
Wow. No, that sounds amazing to hear kind of how your path has been on this. I want to dig a little bit on, you talk about like homeworks, right? And like things that you were doing. So I have like, I guess, two questions. One, I guess I'm trying to think like, what are some examples of maybe homeworks you've done, or is it the same homework every time, or like, is it been differently on each separate one? And I think maybe related to that would be, when you talk about like I'm curious, like, how does the fear dissolve and change? As I say this in an ominous look, how does fear dissolve and change? But yeah, because I'm trying to think, is it during that state that you are able to do it? Like, what happens, like, I guess, like, I don't know, 3 weeks later, is the fear still as strong, or the homework assignments are helping with it? Like, I guess, yeah, I'd be curious, like, how are you tackling them after the induced state is gone? Like, okay, now what do I do? Like, oh, like, let's say you did one in January and that's like February. Are there still like lingering effects of that state feeling, or is it more like you need a boost up or something like that? Because that's the kind of thing I think of, like, oh, like, how frequently should this be done? Is it a once a month thing, or do you still need the lessons from the previous one? Fears in general, like, okay, so there's a fear, I've identified it. Is it the same way I tackle all the fears, or is it like this thing? So yeah, there's a lot of questions there, but I wanted to just like try to get like what happens after the blissful state is gone. I guess, like, what stays after that to continue working on it, because I don't want to paint the image of like, hey, yeah, you do this and then problems are solved. Like, I'd love to hear like how you recommend people should approach it. And then what's maybe like unrealistic expectation? Hey, this is not going to happen, so don't expect this, but this is what you should probably uh do. There's a lot of questions there, so feel whichever one pulls at you.
I love it. I took some notes. So, unrealistic expectations. I recommend anyone going into any trip to have no expectations. This is the best spot to be in. Like, no attachments, no expectation of enlightenment, nothing. As it, like, maybe you're not even going to see any cool colors. Literally go into it being like, I have no idea what's going to happen. Maybe nothing will happen. Let's find out. This will actually give you the best result, because sometimes people go into a mushroom trip and they go, oh, I didn't see the DMT entities. I didn't see the aliens. Where are the aliens? What's happening? And you're just approaching it from a not a curious, like, you're approaching it from a scarcity place in that sense. So I feel like anyone doing a trip, go into it with the explorer's mindset. Like, when you go to a new country and you don't know what the food is like, I mean, you have some ideas. Maybe people have told you it's nice to go here, go there, but you're open to the new. So be open to the new. Now, you mentioned how does the fear dissolve? And you mentioned homework. And I think it's so great that you linked those two together, because they go hand in hand. So the way the fear dissolves, in my experience, is on the shroom trip, you get access to your highest self, your most loving self, your most confident self, your most in touch with yourself. And it gives you a reference point. It's like a little North Star, like a lighthouse beaming at you. And in the state, like you said, you feel amazing. You feel like you can do anything. You feel like all your problems are solved sometimes. But then you come back down to planet Earth. And this is normal, by the way. Just want everyone who is going to do trips to know this, that, yeah, it's totally normal. You're going to lose that state. You're not going to stay in nirvana forever. But the good thing is now you have a reference point. You've seen your highest, most in alignment self, and the homework, the lesson that you got out of it, that's what integrates it into your day-to-day life. So let's say, for example, you did a shroom trip, you realized in your most in love state, you realized, oh, I need to be kinder to people, or I need to be more patient with people. That's the homework. So when you come back to planet Earth, when you have a grumpy day, when it's hard, that is where you start practicing being patient. That's where you start practicing being kind. Or like in my example, let's say the shroom said, you need to put yourself out there. You need to be on camera. You need to tackle these fears. In the shroom trip, I feel this conviction, like, oh, I can do this. When you come back down to Earth, you might go, oh, man, I'm still afraid of posting that YouTube video. What are my friends going to think? That's the homework. Do it. Do it from the place, remembering from that higher place that your higher self already gave you the support, and you've lost touch with him because you're not in the shroom trip. But it's like you have the voicemail. It's like you're no longer on the call with your higher self, but you got the voicemail, you got the notes, you got little pieces of it. So follow those little pieces. And that's how you slowly dissolve the fears, by following the homework. And over time, you do see a huge difference. It might not happen with one trip. So you said, when do you do the next trip? It's when you need another tune-up. So let's say you've done the homework and now you need another pep talk. You need another little bit of encouragement. Maybe you've really lost touch with that higher self. Like something bad happened and you need another realignment. It's like going to a chiropractor, right? Like, I need a new tune-up. And that's when you do the shrooms again, and you go into it and you say, okay, I need more help. I've been trying, I've been failing, I've been falling flat on my face. Please give me some more guidance. And they will. Yeah.
No, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I think it's great to hear, kind of like the way you described the nirvana of it, and then like the slowly coming back to reality, and how the homework is like the voicemail, like, hey, you know what to do, and then just go do it. Like, do you like, in terms of like the action steps you're taking, is that something you have clarity on in the state, or is it more like you're like, okay, here's where I want to go, I need to be present, and then now that you come back, okay, now I need to create a roadmap to get there? Like, what was that process like? That did you like, okay, here are the steps I've identified, I need to be more present, and here's where I'll slowly build up? Like, how did you approach that?
I get a lot of specific action steps from the shrooms. Like, they will literally tell me things to do. And
Wow.
I feel like,
personal coach you have, like,
yes. Well, I feel like it's a combination of my consciousness, my intelligence, and the shroom intelligence. You know how these days it's ChatGPT, right? For whatever. So you're using ChatGPT, but you're also kind of tweaking things on your own. You're making sure that it doesn't fuck up. You're taking your intelligence and using it on ChatGPT. You need the right prompt, right? So I feel like when you do it, you are the prompt, the mushrooms are ChatGPT, and they're giving you feedback, and
there you go.
that and combine it and go, okay. And they do really give me specifics. So I'm trying to think of an example. Like, Bali was an amazing example. So here's a great example, because my friend Sky and his partner, they were living in Bali for a year and a half, and they were telling me how beautiful it was. And I was happy in Vancouver at the time. I was like, okay, cool, like, amazing. But it didn't inspire me at all to go to Bali, because I was on my own journey in Vancouver. And then I do the shrooms, and the shrooms, probably because they can, read my energy, they know that I've been talking to friends about Bali. They take that information and they combine it with their own intelligence, and then they say, you need to go to Bali. So it's like, it's a combination of my knowledge and a combination of their intelligence. Maybe if I was talking to friends and they were living in Costa Rica, maybe the shrooms would then say, you need to go to Costa Rica. So, but some part of it is not you. This is what I feel is so special, is it's not like you just talking to yourself. There does seem to be this extra layer of intelligence that's coming from the plants, and they see a broader map. I'm sure you felt this on some trips of your own, of like, they see the whole perspective that you don't usually get access to. And so they know if James goes to Bali, he's going to learn some epic lessons, and they will tell you that, but you don't always get the reason why. You often get just the action step. Yeah, I'm trying to think of another great example of action steps. I mean, the podcast. Okay, so I'd always kind of wanted to do the podcast, but then on my ayahuasca trip, I had massive downloads on how powerful this podcast could be. That if I was to truly commit to it and be serious about it, how many lives I could influence, how many people I could help inspire to try psychedelics, to help themselves, to connect deeper with their heart. And I think I even started making lists of like my dream guests, and like, and also like people in my life that I wanted to interview. So like my friend Jacob was coming to Bali, and I was like, oh, he's got to be my first guest, because it was like such an alignment of like, he was on his own plant medicine journeys. And so I feel like, again, the shrooms will take your life and they'll apply their ChatGPT intelligence, and they'll output the best possible scenarios. And then another question you asked was, is it the same lessons? And I wanted to answer that. Yes, if you don't do the homework, you will get the same lesson again. because when I got the Bali message in Vancouver, I ignored it for like 3 months, but it kept coming up. And every time I would trip, the shrooms were like, dude, you got to go to Bali, like enough. And so when you hear the same message 3 times, 4 times, you're like, maybe I'm going to look up flight tickets. maybe, maybe I'll look up like some images on Google Images and see what it looks like. Like maybe I'll talk to my friend Sky and ask him, this is actually what happened. I started calling my friend who was living in Bali, and I was like, okay, tell me about this. Now I'm interested. Like, what is the vibe like? And then he painted this vision for me of how his life was there. And I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I need, because I needed more digital nomads in my life. I needed more entrepreneurs. I needed ocean. I needed good weather, and I needed ease of life, like this convenience factor that would allow me to grow and work on myself. And Bali fit all of those check boxes. Great people, great weather, and amazing convenience. Like the lifestyle you can live here is like nothing like America or Canada. So yeah, once I heard that, this is the other thing, is like your logic kicks in and it like check marks. It's like, oh, the shrooms made sense, my intuition says yes, and my logic says yes. And then you know it's a good piece of advice.
Yeah, that's true. It's like there was no roadblocks there. So that sounds like it's great to kind of see, like, you know, kind of this long journey you've been on, and you're at Bali now. I'm curious now, just to kind of slightly shift gears, like what are you currently working on? I know you said a little bit on the podcast, but yeah, I guess I'm trying to think, like, how are you thinking about the next 5 to 10 years from, I guess, this positive state now? Like, what's kind of like in your upcoming future? I know you can't predict it, but like, what are you excited about these days? And like, what's like your next chapter? I guess I'm trying to think, like, are there any fears that come to your mind right now? Do you feel like a big roadblock's been so removed that you're kind of like enjoying the view? Like, I'm curious, like, how are you thinking about the future now, or the present?
The fears definitely come up. It's an evolution. It's always a journey. So like, I'll make a new YouTube video and I'll still be a little nervous to post it, right? So it's just constantly working on those fears and pushing through it. And the next chapter, so the most exciting things for me are the podcast. I want to grow it. I want to publish more episodes. I want it to reach more people. I want it to inspire more people. The YouTube channel, I know that I want to grow that. I want to publish more videos on psychedelics. I feel like a lot of people are seeking that information and that education. And I feel like I can really provide a voice there. And then, of course, the most exciting thing is the 1 billion humans mission. So it's like, wow, let's get as many people as we can who are already on the vibe, who are working on themselves through plant medicine. Let's get them all together on the same day, worldwide, and we all take shrooms or their plant medicine of choice, because some people prefer other plants. We all take the shrooms and we have a core group intention, and then we see what happens to the planet's energy. And then we do it again, and we get a bigger group, and then we do it again. And so hopefully my next step is I want to launch it and like really have the first trip through the 1 billion humans website. I want to build a little community around it, a forum, a place where people can connect, and yeah, stepping into the most fearless version of myself, and like I said, it's a constant evolution. And every time I do shrooms, Azmat, the lessons never stop. You never get to a point where it's like you've done the work. No, there's always more. And I've learned to appreciate that. And I've learned to, in a way, it gives me comfort of like, oh, okay, there is no end to this game. You're always evolving. You're always growing. And the best thing you can do is just find ways to accelerate that. Because if you know you're going to grow anyway, why wait 10 years to become the best version of yourself when actually with enough help, enough support, enough inspiration, and enough resources, you can get there quicker. There's no need to drag it out, Of course, everyone goes at their own pace. It's not a race, but at the same time, seize the day. It's like once you have the lesson, take the juice from it, like get the lesson and then keep evolving and keep growing as a human being.
No, this makes sense. So I think in terms of like if we're trying to guide people or direct people, like, hey, like what would you suggest could be some small steps people can do or take to kind of lean into this? Maybe they're like, hey, I've heard about this, I'm curious about it enough, like, but they're like, they don't want to take the full jump, right? Like I guess kind of like how you moved to Bali, right? You didn't like just pack your bags one day, had this dramatic exit. It took, it seems like a few small exposures and stuff like that where you had to like get yourself comfortable enough before you took the plunge. What would be like some guidance or direction you'd say, hey, go start here and then take it from there? Like, what would you suggest people do?
Whatever you're scared of doing, lean into it. So take the smallest possible action step that is outside of your comfort zone, is comfortable enough for you to do it. So if you're afraid of, let's say you want to do YouTube, but you're afraid of putting yourself on YouTube, record a private video and publish it privately. Like actually record an entire video, watch yourself back, maybe edit it if you need to edit it, and then do 10 more of them. Make them all private. By the 10th video, you're going to be so into, you have leaned into your fear so much that the 11th video, you go to yourself, you know what, I'm not scared of this anymore. I do want to publish this publicly. And then you do. And then the next, so it's like you will reach a point where what was scary to you is kind of boring, and now you want to challenge yourself more. And so when people are afraid of something, usually it's because they're trying to jump too far straight away. And so they say, oh, I can never do this, therefore I won't do it at all. What I'm suggesting to anyone listening is, if you're scared of it, but you want to do it, just take the smallest step and just do a little bit something towards that direction. And you'll feel so much fulfillment. You'll be like, wow, I did it. I recorded an entire video and it's private. That's okay. But I recorded it. I did the work. I put in the work. And then the next day you go, okay, let's do this again. And this time I'm going to do it even better. The next day I'm going to do it even better. The fourth day I'm ready to publish it, you know?
Yeah, no, that sounds super good. It makes me just think like if you had some sort of like a way to like tell people like, hey, like take 10 attempts, like set a minimum, like, okay, 5 to 10 attempts without worrying about, like, if you're worried about singing, sing privately for like 5, 10 attempts, or acting, or even starting a business, like whatever it is. It does seem like it's not like a all or nothing type scenario. Like you can just gradually do it and just see how you feel before you feel like you need to like fully commit. It does seem like it's like almost like an identity thing. Like you're trying to like change your identity so quickly that it's like, no, it's not gonna happen. So you need to like slowly like, hey, maybe I'm a person who just watches a video on how to make videos or etc. So that kind of, I mean, I'm kind of trying to do this with my own stuff where I'm like, oh, I want to do more, filming or creative writing, and I have no idea. So I'm like, okay, I've taken a film class. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna read a book on it, or I'm watching some YouTube videos on it. So it's like, if that's like the smallest, I'm even taking even a smaller version of it because I've not even like made anything. But I'm like, okay, let me read about it. But I think, yeah, it does seem like good directional advice of like, hey, like just like keep doing things, exposure therapy, I guess, in some way.
Yes, and eventually you do still need to take the leap. So I'm glad you brought filmmaking, because filmmaking was something I was super passionate about as well. And I had worked on a couple sets in Vancouver. I had helped other people with their short films. I helped other people with their music videos. But then when it came time to direct my own music video, which I did with Alicia Marie for Criminal Kid, amazing artist. And I still had to take that leap. Like I'd never, despite all the preparation and all the leaning in, at the end of the day, I had to step into the greatness, my own greatness. I had to step into the director chair and be like, okay, I'm the leader on the set. We're filming this. And so there is, I would say, you can lean in to a degree, which is great. And I absolutely recommend it. But there also needs to be that extra little bit of courage where you just go, okay, we are doing this, and I am going to step into the greater, more confident version of myself, and we're going to find out. And if I fall flat on my face, it's all right. I can handle it.
Yeah, I'd be curious, like, since you brought that up, like, what was it like taking that like you said, at some point there is going to be like a gap. So if you're like climbing a hill, there's going to be like a cliff, a small cliff that you need to actually jump on this now. Like, even though it's not like a huge ravine, it's like, okay, it's a small jump, but it's still within you've not jumped that far before, but it's like, okay, but yeah, I guess I'm curious, like, how were you feeling at the time? Were you like, okay, I've not done this, but I feel confident that I can do it, and I'm not sure if I can, like, but like, yeah, I'm curious, like, how are you framing it yourself at the time, and maybe since then, how have you looked back at that?
What I do when I have to jump these cliffs is I over prepare like crazy. So I
That's
just
definitely true.
I just prepare as much, like so much that if I fail, well, at least I've done all the work I could have to prepare. So I did this for the music video where I just like, I think for days and days, I would just plan all the locations and okay, how are we gonna get from one location to another, and how is the light gonna be there, and okay, how am I gonna edit this in the end, and which shots do I want? And we shot like 7 to 11 hours of footage for a 3-minute video. Like that's over preparing, like by a lot. But
Yeah, there's a ratio, right? There's like a ratio people follow, like 20 to 1 or something like that. I don't know where this landed on, like 10 to 1, like in like you over get footage just in case you need it.
every film overshoots. It's just the nature of film. You're always gonna cut something, but we definitely overshot. But you know what? I was happy about that because that's what I wanted. I wanted a lot of options in the edit, and I knew that, you know, if in case something didn't work out in one location, we had footage from another, and that there was always going to be options. So over preparing would be my answer. If you can just prepare, you will get that extra bit of confidence to make the jump. So the same thing happened with my first podcast episode with Jacob. I was so nervous to do this episode. You know, here's the thing. You always kind of feel deep down, I can do this. I can probably do this. But then there's the other side of you that's like, but can I do this? What if I realize that I can't do it? How devastating that would be. So there's always the two sides, and you always know deep down what you can do. And I think that's the desires, that's the dreams of the heart that are calling to you. And so I knew I could do the podcast, but I also didn't know because I had never done it. And so I over prepared. I prepared for like literally weeks, I think, for this episode. Not continuously, but like I would have this giant notes section where it had all the details of Jacob's life from birth until now.
I have your social security number here. I have everything. I have stalked you.
Everything. I went through his entire Instagram looking for stories and tidbits that I could like source on the pod, and all the questions that I could do. And then I started like, then there was too many questions, so I started cutting questions, and so it was a whole process, but all of it was necessary. All of it was good training. It's like, you know, going to the gym, but for the mind, and going to the podcast gym. So I was going to the podcast gym for a few weeks. And when I showed up at the first episode for Jacob, yes, I was super nervous. But then within 5 minutes of the conversation, I was like, oh, okay, this is going well. I can do this. You always know within the first couple minutes of like, okay, this is going well, this is flowing. You feel the flow. And then the footage came back from the studio, and I looked at the footage sort of like this, like, I don't know if I see this, like, this is, what if it's bad? What if I thought the episode went so well, but then the footage is the truth. If the footage is good, then it's good. But what if my imagination made it seem well? So I look at the footage and I'm like, oh, it's actually really good. And then that feeling of relief comes, and also that feeling of accomplishment where you go, I knew I could do this, and I did it. And it's the same thing with the music video. I knew I could direct a music video, and I did. And this is like, I feel like this is one of the ultimate experiences that I would love every listener to experience. You're scared to do something, you prepare, you lean into it, you go ahead and do it, nervous, scared as fuck, and then you do it, and you look back at yourself, and you're looking at a new version of yourself. That you can literally, from that moment on, you can say, I'm a podcast host. From that moment on, you can say, I'm a director. And That is the identity shift you're talking about. So the shift can happen internally, but it's when you manifest it externally and you allow others to see you working and others to see you doing the work, it solidifies it. So so I'm always very grateful with when the manifestation happens in real life, because even though I knew it deep down, it's so much better to actually know it on the outside as well.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think it's also great that you're like kind of emphasizing this part of like it's not like the shrooms are not like the answer, they're like the catalyst for like
They're
those
the
things.
catalyst. I love that. I love that. What do you mean by that? Like, tell me more.
Yeah, like you said, right? It's like even though you did this, right? It things didn't change immediately, but you had something inside you that like clicked, like, oh, you had some directions where you started focusing more on a certain area of your life, which you probably wouldn't have done or neglecting it, but the work still needed to get done, right? So it's like
Yeah.
you had an insight, and then but you needed action to kind of really make that insight more, real world. Like, yeah, otherwise you said it would have been internal to you the entire time. You need to, I guess, merge the two, right? It's like I'm imagining there's an internal world and there's an external world, and maybe the pain that you feel, it's like there's a disharmony between the two. They're not like
Oh
doing
yeah.
it. So this way, you're like your internal world started shifting, but now you need to like make the external world reflect your inner world. So I guess I'm trying to think that maybe that's where the tension comes from. So if those things are not in harmony, you're always going to feel that. But now you had the internal world clicking. You're like, okay, now I just need to like project this outside.
Oh wow. I love how you describe that. It's the pain you're describing. Yeah, it's between the vision that you know who you could be and the reality of who you are now. And which one is the truth? The truth is the vision. That is actually possible for you. But if you don't do the work to bring yourself to the vision, then unfortunately the truth becomes who you are now. You stay stagnant, you stay who you are. So the beautiful thing with the mushrooms, I love the word catalyst. That's amazing. I'm going to borrow that. So the mushrooms give you the vision of who you already know you are. They show you the most amazing version of Osmat that could be, the most courageous, most confident, most in alignment. And then you come back down to earth, and that's where the work begins. But because you've seen the vision and it was like crystallized by the mushrooms, it gives you that extra little bit of confidence. You're like, ooh, okay, the mushrooms agree with my vision. So therefore, I have not only myself supporting it, but also the mushrooms are supporting me. I know this might sound crazy to anyone listening, but it really feels like that. It's like, okay, I got this validation from the shrooms that my vision is not insane, that there is validity to it, that this dream I hold for myself in my heart, it can be true. And furthermore, they give you the homework. They're like, here are the next action steps. Do this, call this person, publish this video, write this blog post. They will always give you the next possible action step, at least in my experience. And but I love that, the tension between the vision and the reality. And that is maybe what made the manifestation so sweet. It's the moment of the convergence. I can imagine this. I mean, I haven't done this myself, but I'm imagining a person like who always wanted to speak on stage, and they wanted to be on stage. They want to be on stage, and they have that vision, and finally they're on stage. And it's like the melding of the vision and the 3D. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's like the reinforcement or the reflection of your outer world and your inner world is like the same image. Like you're like, oh, I see this, but then the mirror is showing you something else in the external world. So you're like, no, I see something different. So it does seem like doing this, it's like it seems like gives you clarity first before you take, because you can take a lot of action, right, and not have any clue. Because sometimes action does lead to insight. That's also true. So it's not like the way I guess I imagine it's like a circle. Like you could take a lot of action, but you need clarity. But if you got clarity, it'll do this way. So this sounds super, amazing to do, and it seems like everybody should do it. So I guess if you had to if people are interested in pursuing this path, like what would you suggest if someone wanted to lean into this path. Like, yeah, I want to explore psychedelics a little bit more, and I don't know where to get started, or I have fears and all this stuff. I feel like I have a sense of what you'll say, given what we've been talking about fears in general. But like, what would you suggest people take as a first small step to lean into? Like, hey, if you want to explore this, we've discussed it today, here's what I suggest you start with.
If they want to explore psychedelics specifically, I would say start with mushrooms. They're the friendliest psychedelics from everything else. I feel like they're the safest, the friendliest. Start with a very low dose. Although if you do too low, you might not feel it. So I'd say 1 gram is probably a good dose for almost anyone. If you have more body weight, you might need more just because, the density. So 1 gram. Watch my video on the 8 things you need to know before a first trip. I think that's really helpful. I go into detail on like all the things that one should prepare before a trip. I can list some of them here. For example, intention. Go into it with a very clear intention. Could be general, like I want to learn. I'm a student. I'm here to learn. That's like, or like show me what I most need to know. That's another easy one. You could also go with a specific intention. Like if you have some specific trauma, some specific wound, you can go, I really want to work on this. I want to work on my relationship with this person on this trip. So intention is key. Environment is absolutely key. You want to be in the safest possible environment. If it's your absolute first time, try to find a friend, someone close to you that has experience with mushrooms, and maybe they can trip sit for you. I think that's super helpful. Environment, music is important to me. I always like to have a nice background mix. It keeps me grounded. Environment, intention, people. So if you are going to do it with someone, make sure it's really good energies. No one that you have complicated relationship with. Don't do it with your mother-in-law. It's not a good idea. Don't do it with your ex. Don't do it with your friend who you like, but you don't really like them, but you kind of like them. Like, no, because all of that is going to float up.
It's going to come out.
It's going to come out, and it's going to be it's going to be a rough ride. I think most bad trips, and they're not really bad, but they can be rough. Let's say most rough trips are due to environment or people. So if you just get those 2 things right, you're pretty much golden. Good environment, good people, or you're alone in a safe environment. That's the way to do it. And just do some research, do some education, read on first time trip advice online, on Reddit, on my videos I provided, and leap into the abyss, see what happens.
No, that sounds super good. Yeah, I guess we'll close this out in this way. But what is 2 questions? One will just I'll do 3 questions because one I was curious about. One, are there any specific resources or authors or thought leaders that you think would be good for people to like check out? If nothing comes out, that's fine too. Maybe a good Reddit search is good. But I was just curious, like, is there any author or podcast or resource that you found particularly like, yeah, this is the one to read to get started with? Like if someone has like 0 information on this.
Well, I have not read this person's book, but I've heard so much good stuff about it. How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan seems to come up a lot. Like, to be honest, my mantra is I'm just going to do trips. I'm not going to read about this. So I tend not to read books about it, although I like reading spiritual texts. I like reading, because a lot of the things I see in the spiritual texts, they resonate to me on what I see on shrooms. So if I'm reading something, it's usually for the spiritual aspect, not the chemical, scientific aspect of shrooms. But if someone needs a scientific or history or cultural background, I heard Michael Pollan's work is amazing. And then also, I really like Aubrey Marcus's podcast. This is someone who has a lot of integrity around plant medicine and has gone deep into plant medicine, into ayahuasca, into mushrooms. A lot of his podcasts touch on that, so I would recommend that. And then, of course, my podcast, which is going to have lots of guests around psychedelics, so they can check that out as well.
Yeah, no, that sounds super good. Yeah, I think those are all great resources. So the other question I had, the rapid fire one, you said this early on, was like, you made a dream list of podcast guests. I was just curious, like, who is on that list? Who is like your whale on a podcast guest to have?
Well, I would love Aubrey Marcus on the pod. I think that would be an epic conversation. I also love this this guy called Robert Edward Grant. He's this fascinating polymath who goes to the Egyptian pyramids and studies numerology and like connects with aliens, and it's just fascinating, dude. And yeah, I mean, there are some dream guests that I would love, but let's leave it to Aubrey Marcus and Robert Edward Grant.
Yeah, there you go. Let's put that intention out there. No, that makes sense. And I guess maybe the last question would be more on like any parting words or thoughts or any like message that you want to kind of summarize people like, hey, consider this or think about something, whatever comes to your mind, like any parting thoughts, intentions or feelings you want to impart on the listeners.
Yeah, you know, if there's one thing that mushrooms have taught me, it's that when you trip on mushrooms, there's an arc to the trip. So sometimes it starts off a little rough, you kind of find your wings, then you're soaring, then you're gliding, then you're having fun, then there's a dip and you're like, oh my God, am I gonna fall down? And then you find your way again, and then you kind of soar again. And then you gently, like a feather, land on ground on planet Earth. And what it taught me is life is the same way. Life is just one big trip. So when you're experiencing hardship in life and you're experiencing dips and lows and depression and it's hard and it's rough, just remember that it's not forever. There's a trip, there's an arc to your life as well. And it's never going to just stay exactly the same for years on end. There will be highs and lows, and when there's lows, you try to find your wings and you work through it and you find the resources and the help you need. And part of the resources is psychedelics. I feel like a lot of people could be helped with their struggle in life through psychedelic therapy, just doing it themselves. They will get so much insights and so much wisdom on how they can improve their situation. So I would say, as parting words, remember that life is just one big trip, and that you're in it for the ride, and sometimes it's a little rough, but keep the faith. Don't let the roughness destroy your spirit, you know? Just remember that it's all going to work out in the end.
I think that's a wonderful reminder to don't let the roughness, beat down your spirit. I think that's a wonderful tension. Yeah, I think that's it on our call for the James Xander show. We'll leave all the links in the show notes, guys.